cash it out.
Okay.
So let me talk to a few people. I'll tell them
To,
what the
to tell him
situation
the guy had needed a refrigerator. His refrigerator's all broken. His financial issue.
is. So really, it doesn't matter if it's delayed because this isn't live anyway. So that's okay. As long as that's getting recorded on YouTube, that's what's important.
Okay. But that's going to be on the YouTube now, that thing?
Yeah. So
Okay. That's not a problem. Um,
let me I'll tell them to Venmo me.
that'll be the best
See, we
thing.
don't have to sell.
Right. So if you get the 326, if you get more than 326, then we'll give it towards the food. You know what I mean? 326 will finish paying the what's it called? The fridge. You know what I mean? Anything above, we'll give to him directly.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning, Ralph. Good to have you back.
I spoke to David yesterday.
That's great. What did he say?
Yeah, and we just, you know, caught up a little bit.
Okay, that's great. Okay, hopefully that, the fact that he knows that you're here, that'll be an extra incentive. Okay. Good morning, everybody. We are on 58 towards the bottom of the page. Nema ketanoi. Let us say what we have been discussing until now is an argument of earlier rabbis. Now, what have we been discussing? We've been discussing if you have something, an item that is mukseh. Let's say we said dirt. Dirt, we said, is mukseh. It's mukseh means it's separated. It's separated from use because what do I generally? I don't use dirt on Shabbat. Dirt that's part of the floor. It's part of the ground. It's not on my radar on Shabbat. I'm separated from that dirt on Shabbat, generally speaking. But we did say that dirt has also some types of uses, just like to absorb a spill, just like a rock. Rocks are also mukseh. They're separated from my use. I don't plan on using rocks on Shabbat, even though rocks do have sometimes a use. If I want the rock to hold the door open or to be a door stopper, to hold down my papers that they shouldn't fly away outside when the wind is blowing. So the rocks do have uses, but they are generally not used, not on the radar. They're generally not used, and generally I am separated from using the rock before Shabbat. I'm separated from using the dirt before Shabbat. We said if you designate the rock permanently for use before Shabbat, you designate a specific rock. That rock no longer is mukseh. That's what we said. Now we had the discussion. One of the rabbis are talking about dirt, afar, where what morning Asaf. I don't know if I said it proper. Good morning to Asaf. Good morning, Asaf. I don't know. So dirt, a guy before Shabbat, if he did not designate the dirt permanently for Shabbat use, he brought some dirt into his house and he put it into the corner. Is that good enough? He was thinking of using it on Shabbat, if he needs it on Shabbat, but he didn't make a permanent designation. Is that enough or not? Because remember, we had the opinion when you go back, going back to the wood, right? We had an argument by wood. Do you have to go ahead? The pieces, the palm branches that the leaves had fallen off and they became very hard, that you cut for the purpose of firewood. We had an argument between two rabbis whether you need to, or I don't maybe more than two rabbis. We had the Tanakama, which would be the Chachamim, that said you have to tie the wood together to show that it's standing for a bench. But if you didn't tie them together, the fact that you had a mind to use it as a bench is not enough. Even the and the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says you don't need to tie it together. So we had a argument whether you have to do an action in the item in order for it no longer to be mukseh, or just having a mind to use it for the Shabbat, is that enough? Then we had the case of the dirt, where the rabbi said just bringing the dirt into the house is good enough, even though you didn't permanently designate it. And the Gemara said there seemed to be contradiction to what we said earlier. They have to do it, that according to one of the rabbis that said you have to do an action. The Gemara says the dirt has nothing to do, there's no action you could do in the dirt to show really, to make the dirt, that it's clear that this dirt is being used to absorb a spill. So when you can't do an action, the Gemara says in the item, like in the wood, you could tie it. That's the action. But when you can't do an action, the Gemara says maybe even the rabbi who requires an action in general. Good morning, Simon. But Simon's here. But when you can't do an action, he doesn't require anything more, and just the mere thought of using it for this Shabbat would be sufficient. That's what the Gemara was saying, wanted to suggest. And now the Gemara is challenging that idea that we just said. That to say that something loses the status of muksa, according to all opinions, even the opinion that says generally need an action to take something out from being muksa, but when an item does not have an action that could be generally done to it, you don't need that action. You don't need, since there's no action to be done, it's automatically by your thought to use it for Shabbat, loses its status of mukseh. Nema ketanoi. Let us say that it's an argument of Tanoim, of rabbis. Where do we find that argument? B'chol chafin et hakelim. If you want to, let's say on Shabbat, if you want to go ahead and rub a utensil to give it a little shine, you could use different types of materials, except you can't, chutz mikli kesef, you can't, now we're not talking about using a polish, we're not talking about taking a silver polish, but we're talking about some other materials that they would use, except chutz mikli kesef begartikon. You can't use the gartikon. The gartikon can't be used to give a little shine to the utensil on the Shabbat. And Rashi says gartikon is a type of dirt that grows, it goes in the barrel of wine. They call it alum. And when you go ahead and that really does the job, and it really enhances the silver utensil, because when you rub this dirt against the utensil, it's memachik. It smooths it's not only does it give a little shine, it smooths the actual utensil. It changes the form. I mean, what you want to say, it smooths out the utensil itself, besides in addition to the shine. And that smoothing, it draws out, just like you cut away something, it cuts away by the smoothing out of the utensil through this gartikon, and you can't use the gartikon on the Shabbat. But hanete v'chol muta. But the implication is, I can't use this gartikon on this silver utensil because it's going to scrape away some of the silver, and it's going to give it that smoothness. But if you're going to use like sand or some other type of materials like that don't actually smooth out the silver, it would be permitted to use sand or neter to go ahead and give a little extra shine to this silver utensil, right? And you see, if you look over here, they say Karubya to shine on Shabbat, except this tartar. It says they say it's a deposit that forms the barrel of wine, but but to use neter or sand, you'll be allowed to. But now the question is, why should you be able to use sand? Sand is generally mukseh on Shabbat. If you make like a sand box that you have for kids on Shabbat, right, where they play in the sand, so there you already designated the sand box for permanent use. So it should be like it's like the stone that you designated for permanent use, for permitted use, right? The sand boxes, the kids are playing in the sand. They pick up the sand, they put the sand on. That would not be, let's say, that should not be muksa, but regular sand, what use do I have for sand? Sand is generally separated. I'm not planning on using sand on Shabbat, right, Simon? I'm not. So therefore, but this opinion sounds like if I want to use the sand to put a shine on on my silver utensil, I could do that on Shabbat if I thought about using it for that purpose, even though I didn't permanently designate the sand for that purpose. But we learned in the Braita, netev v'chol asur. I can't use, let's say, sand to rub against my silver utensil to give a shine. So we have one opinion that says I could use sand to give it a shine. One opinion, at least one inference that I could use sand, because the sand is not going to smoothen out, take away from, it's not going to reach the level of smoothing out the utensil. Only give it a shine, right? On wood, sometimes you want to smooth out the wood, right? That's like a finishing touch, or it's or not a finishing touch.
Dedicated, I don't know, a handful of sand in your kitchen in the purpose for shining your silver.
So if you designate it permanently, that's fine. But here we're not talking about you designated. You said I had in mind to use it for this Shabbat. I'll use the sand. I have this pile of sand. I'll use this handful of sand for this Shabbat. I'll have in mind for this Shabbat to use it. But let's say there'll be some sand left, and what or the fact that even maybe the sand doesn't, let's say, get ruined, Simon. I could reuse the sand, let's say, every week, but I had in mind to use the sand for this week. I didn't say this sand, I'm going to use it every week. And one opinion says I can't use sand to shine, which the Gemara is understanding that even though you had in mind before Shabbat, even if I had in mind to use the sand before Shabbat, I can't use it. And the other opinion says the inference is I can't just use this tartar stuff, but sand I could use. So what's the issue? What are they arguing in? Why does one rabbi say I could use this? Why does one rabbi say I cannot use the sand for the shine? And one rabbi seems to say I could use this, implies that I could use the sand. We said the other material, the neter material, the garsik, not that, the gartical material actually smooths out the utensil, and that's one of the 39 malachot of Shabbat is machik. You can't smooth out. You can't smooth out an item. So the Gemara says, like smoothing, making the skin of the leather, the skin of the animal smooth by cutting off all its hair and smoothing it. You can't do that on Shabbat. So too, you can't do other things that are similar, other things that are smoothing. So the Gemara says the most probably the arguing in the hakamifli, the argument the following. Marsava, one rabbi holds, one master holds, bi'inan maaseh, that to remove a status of mukseh, you have to do an action. and there's no action to do in the sand. So sand is muksa. Thinking about using it is not enough. However, Umar Sava, one rabbi holds lo bina maisa. It's you don't need an action. Just just having a mind to use it for the Shabbat is enough. So we see that um, there seems to be the Gemara suggesting that the argument of whether you could use sand on the silver utensil is dependent on the whether you to remove something from mukseh, something that generally requires some muksa item. In order to remove from the status of muksa, you have to do an action. And if you can't, so if you can't do an action, so you lose on the deal. It's not enough the fact that you have a mind to use it for the Shabbat. It would still be muksa. So the Gemara says, lo. And again, in the opinion, it says you could use it because it says that you don't need to have, if you can't do an action, so you're fine just having a mind to use it.
So the issue is you can get away with not doing an action only because you can't do it.
Right. That's what the Gemara wants to say, that the opinion that requires an action would let you get away with the action without doing the action if you can't do an action. I mean, the rabbis don't require you to do more than just thinking of it. When you can't do more than when you can't do an action, they didn't require more than that. Just having a mind to use it for Shabbat would be good enough. For the Shabbat would be good enough. So the Gemara says, lo, not necessarily, the Gemara says. Don't say that there's an argument, because remember, Rav Yehuda, the early rabbi, Rav Yehuda was the later rabbi. He went on record and he says, you could bring dirt into your house before Shabbat, even if, he seems to indicate, even if it was a one-time, you had a one-time, you didn't say I'm permanently designating it, just bring it in, put it in the corner, have in mind I'm going to use it for, if there's a spill, that's good enough. And he didn't, and his opinion, he's saying his law, which would seem to be unanimously accepted by all rabbis, all previous rabbis. He doesn't say my opinion was only following one rabbi. He seems to indicate that his opinion would be universal. And then the obvious question is, how can his opinion be universal? There is a rabbi that says you have to do an action. So Rabbi Yehuda would say that rabbi would agree by dirt. It's a different story. You can't do an action, but there's no action by dirt to show that it's designated that you're using it now, at least for Shabbat, for an absorbent to absorb the liquid, and therefore, since there's no action that you can really do, he would also agree you don't need. You're fine. He would agree that's good enough. And the Gemara was challenging that by saying, no, I show you that he wouldn't agree. Don't tell me when something is not able to do an action, you're fine, and just having a mind to use it is good enough for the Shabbat. We seem to indicate that we have sand that you can't really do an action in, and there's an opinion that says you can't use the sand. Why can't you use the sand to make it shine? Sand, the Gemara is thinking, is not going to smooth out the sand. Does not have the strength to smooth. It's not going to smooth it out. It's not going to smooth out and drag some of the silver with it. So why can't you? Now, yeah, so the Gemara saying, why you can't? Well, it's probably because sand is muktzah, and you didn't do any action. Could be the fact you couldn't do anything. Okay, you couldn't do an action, but that doesn't remove its status of muktzah. And the Gemara shoots back low. No, you don't have to. That's not a proof that they're arguing about this concept. Because maybe the kuliyama lo bina masa. Maybe everybody would agree. If something, maybe you don't need an action. everybody would hold something that you cannot do an action in, automatically you don't need an action. And therefore you're good if you have a might use it for the Shabbat. And therefore by the dirt, you had a might use it the Shabbat. There's no action that you can really do in the dirt. So just you're fine by just having a might use it for the Shabbat. You brought it to the house, you had a might use it for the Shabbat, that's good enough. But velo kasha. But now, why is there an argument when it comes to sand? Why should I not be able to use the sand if having in mind to use the item for Shabbat is good enough according to everyone in something that you can't really do an action in? So why can't I have in mind to use the sand to shine the silver? By the way, we can't use shoe polish. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, but right, we don't shoe polish our shoes on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, Harab Yehuda, Harab Shimon. Maybe it's an argument here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Now, what is the argument we had? This is a very famous argument we're going to see throughout the tractate of Shabbat. We spoke about it in the past. If you have a bed, or you have a bench. Let's say a bench. Well, now it's the summertime, so the bed is a good example. You want to lay down in the sun, right, Simon? So if you drag your bed, morning, Nathan. If you drag your bed, on the dirt floor outside, it might make in the field, it might make a furrow. And that's called softening up the ground. A furrow or groove is what you want to do when you want to go ahead and plant. It's a form of plowing, right? You soften up the ground. After you soften up the ground, you put the seeds in the ground. So can you drag your bed on Shabbat? And we're not talking about a carpet floor. We're not talking about a tile floor. We're talking about a dirt floor where it might make a groove. It might make a furrow. It might actually soften up the dirt for planting that has the ability to plant. So we have an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, since it's not definite that you're going to make a groove, you might not make any groove or furrow by dragging the bed. The fact that it might happen, but when you're not intending for that to happen, and it's not definite that it's going to happen, you could do it. However, Rabbi Yehuda says no. Rabbi Yehuda says the fact that you might, I would think it would be a rabbinic prohibition according to Rabbi Yehuda. I would think that the fact that you might do an act of work on Shabbat, even though you weren't intending to do the work, even though it's not definite the work is going to be done, the act of labor will be done. But the fact that there's a mere possibility that it will be done, it can't be done. So that is the argument over there. So the Gemara wants to say, maybe when you rub the silver with sand, it's possible that it might smoothen the silver. And smoothing a utensil on Shabbat, smoothing something on Shabbat, like the case, what they did in the Mishkan, we said before, they would smooth the hide, the skin of the animal. Cutting off all its hair. And smoothing was one of the one of the labors that they did in part of the working process. So maybe that's what they're arguing in. That you might come, even though you're not intending to smooth out the silver, but it is might be a possibility that it might. You're not using the hole, the sand, to smooth it out, but it might. You know what? It might, if you rub it good enough, it might actually take away some of the silver and might actually give a smooth finish, a smoothness to the silver. So maybe that's the argument. Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda, one is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that says By the way, Ralph Batesh is fulfilling the mitzvah of Belechtecha Baderech, to learn when you're traveling. He just got into his car, and the phone is on. Got a good smile on the faces of the people here, Ralph. Um, by the way, you're allowed to learn in your car, by the way. You're allowed to. It's not forbidden. Well, I say you're allowed to come early to davening too, right? So you're allowed to. Okay, it's a big mitzvah. Now, not just an allowance, I'm being a little whatever, you get what I'm saying. Harab Yehuda da'avar she'emes chaven asur. The opinion that says you can't use the sand to want to give a nice little extra shine to the silver on Shabbat is because he's afraid it's da'avar she'emes chaven as asur. If you might go ahead and, even though you're not intending to give a smoothness to it, it might happen, therefore you can't do it. And Harab Shimon da'amar da'avar she'emes chaven mutar. And the opinion that says that you can do it on that, the inference that you could use sand on Shabbat to give a little shine, extra little shine to your silver, is the opinion of Shimon, who says that you're not intending for the smoothness to happen. The fact that it might happen, that's not a problem. And the fact that you had in mind before Shabbat to use the sand for that little shine takes it away from being mukseh. Because in general, sand is mukseh. But just that thought, I'm going to use the sand this Shabbat, that's what he wants to suggest. So the Gemara says, now we're going to have to see La Halacha and Shulchan Aruch, what status does sand have? Because we know that we seem to come out that a rock is a very high level mukseh, that you have to remove it from the status of mukseh. It seemed like you have to, one of the things is if you go ahead and you designate it permanently for a permitted use, permanently for a doorstop, or permanently to hold your papers down outside so that the wind doesn't blow it away or something like that, we have to see what the status of sand is, because sand is one of the examples of a muksa item, but to see where it falls. Now, the Gemara asks the following question. Okay, you want to say that. You want to say that they're not arguing, the sand is not arguing in the issue of something that's mukseh. To remove it from the status of mukseh, do I have to do an action? And but an item that's mukseh, where there's no action to be done, meaning wood, you could tie wood together. That's an action. But sand, which there's no real action to be done to show that you want to use it as an absorbent, maybe everybody would agree you do not need to actually do anything in it. Just having in mind for this, to use it for the Shabbat will be enough. And the Gemara says, you wanted to say that the inference of the Breita that says that it will be permitted to use sand to give a shine is because there's no concern of smoothing, and we don't make a rabbinic prohibition of using the sand on the silver because you're not intending to go ahead and remove anything. So you're telling me that is Reb Shimon. You're telling me that the author of that Breita that would allow the sand to be used on the utensil of silver is Reb Shimon. Ema Seifa. But that Seifa, the end of that Breita, the end of that teaching, shows you clearly that that's not Reb Shimon. It's not working. The allowance of the Breita that says you could use sand on the utensil is not because of the fact that you don't have a mind to smooth it out. Right? That's what they want to say. They want to say that the reason why you use the sand on the silver utensil, because you don't have a mind to smoothen it out, and it's not definite it's going to smooth out. You're not intending that it will smooth out. So you're not intending, that's what you're allowed to do an act on Shabbat, that it's not definite, you can do the violation of the labor, and you're not intending to do it, right? But the Gemara says, but what does the Sefer say? Of a lo yochef sa'aro. You can't use this sand or other than the neter as a shampoo for your hair, because when you go ahead and you rub your hair around, there's a good chance that some hairs are going to come out. The hair might come out. And the fact that your hair might come out, so you're not allowed to cut hair on Shabbat. And therefore this opinion says you can't use it in your hair on Shabbat. So the Gemara says, but if this opinion is Rabbi Shimon should allow you, if you want to put that in your hair on Shabbat, you want to rub it in your hair on Shabbat, you should be allowed to, because Rabbi Shimon holds, if Rabbi Shimon holds that you are allowed to do something as long as, if it's not definite that the labor is going to happen, that the malacha, that the act of work is going to happen, he allows you to do it. Rabbi Shimon Mishra Shari, he says it's permitted. Ditnan, learned in the Mishnah. We'll turn the page. Nazir. What's the story? Could a Nazir? Good morning. Could a Nazir is not allowed to cut any of his hairs, right? That's one of his prohibitions. He can't go to the cemetery. He can't go, make himself tamei. Welcome. Thank you for joining. He can't come to the cemetery. Chodesh Tov, everybody. He can't go in and go to the cemetery, but he can't cut his hair. Now, what about, could he go ahead and rub his hair with this type of, with sand? Let's say if he wants to rub his hair with the sand, he's allowed to rub his hair. Reb Shimon says, you could rub your hair, the Nazir could use this type of detergent, whatever type, I don't know, however sand will clean the hair, but to rub the hair, he could use it. The Nazir, why could he use it? Because, isn't it possible that some hair might come out? The answer is, maybe he can't comb the hair, maybe combing is too much. More, very likely that it'll come out, maybe perhaps. I presume he won't be able to use the comb. Yeah, we're going to see. It said he can't use the comb. Rashi says because comb is definitely going to take out the hair. The comb will definitely take out the hair. But when you use this other material, it's not definite that it's going to take out the hair. But you know what? The hair might come out. But hair might come out, right? So we say, he says, Nazir chofeif umefasfeis. He could use his hands to, you could put on the thing, and he could go ahead and separate between his hairs with his fingers, even though it's possible that some hair might come out, because he's not intending for hair to come out. It's not definite that hair is going to come out, so therefore he's not allowed to. He's allowed to do that of a lo sorek, but he can't go ahead and sorek. He can't go ahead and use a comb. Now you told me a moment ago. So if it's Reb Shimon, if the story of the sand, that the allowance of using the sand is Reb Shimon, so why does he say you can't use this and put this in your hair on the Shabbat? It's not definite that he would hold. You should be able, the same way he holds that a Nazir could use this material on his hair anytime. So because it's not definite it's going to come out in any of his hair. So he should allow you the same thing. He should allow on Shabbat. If the author is Reb Shimon, then Reb Shimon should allow you on Shabbat to use this sand in your hair. So the Gemara says, Elaha v'ha Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara wants to say both brightos regarding the sand is Rabbi Yehuda. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda holds, if you're not intending to do the act on Shabbat of work, the fact that it can be done, it might be done, you're not allowed to do the action that might cause an act of work to be done. You can't drag according to Rabbi Yehuda the bed because you might make the furrow. That's enough. That's enough of a reason why you can't drag the bed, even though you don't intend to make a furrow, and it's not definitely going to make a furrow. And what's the argument here by the sand in your on the utensil? What's the argument? Hai Tana leaves Rabbi Yehuda Sava Gorir. One Tana holds that when you rub the silver with the sand, it sometimes it can take off some of the the silver, and therefore the fact that it could take off some of the silver, you might be doing the act of smoothing out on Shabbat, which you can't do. And the other time, hold the Sava, that low garir, the sand will not take out any of the metal. There's nothing to worry about. It's not like when you drag the bed, you might make a groove. But the other rabbi holds there's nothing going to happen. It's not, no finishing, no smoothing that's going to happen. It's not going to, the sand is not going to smooth it at all. Nothing to be concerned about, and therefore you can do it on Shabbat. Have a great day. A Chodesh Tov. We'll see everybody hopefully tomorrow. Welcome Ralph again back. Ralph is already back in a good groove. Talking about grooves. He's in a good groove. He's in a great groove. How do you like that? Was that good or not, Adam? Jewish humor. I call it kosher humor. There's a lot of humor out there. There's not there's not enough kosher humor out there. Have a great day, Asaf. Chodesh Tov. Have a good Chodesh. Take care. All the best. Boker Tov.